Welcome to Zola Monday, creating Zola Mondays. We're so happy you're joining us. We really love glory, right? And it seemed appropriate that since we're focusing on lessons learned in the seasons of challenges, that's one of the lessons we've learned. We've learned that the glory will be ours. And I think that's really striking, particularly since we just had the June 19th celebration yesterday. So we're happy you joined us. We're interested in helping us create and wield Zola. Zola, as you know, is love energies that will connect us to the Ngola, which are the infinite energies that heal and correct and direct us. So I'm Linda James Myers. I'm your moderator for today. And we have with us Dr. Harry Lindner, Evan August, and Jojo Hickson, who also will be introducing themselves. But I just want to put it out there that this is going to be our last session until August. We're going to take a hiatus and come back in August and start a new season. So be thinking about what you like us to talk about and what you're interested in, and don't hesitate to email and let us know. So today, as we think about the lessons learned in the seasons of challenges, I guess we should start by just seeing if there's any comment or question any of our panelists have. If not, then I will go on and say, or ask a question. I'm wondering how you all are thinking about the national holiday the Senate just passed for June 19th. Of course, they can't pass voting rights, so they can't pass health care, but they can pass a holiday. So, what are your thoughts?
I think that it's super symbolic and I feel like a lot of us called it. Like we knew they were going. As soon as we saw like Congress people and dashikis kneeling, like it was just they just look a fool. Like we knew they were going to do something stupid like that. But it's like where are the real results? Like where's the equity in housing, and education, and food and water and all this stuff that Black people actually need to survive and thrive? And it's like okay, thanks for Juneteenth. Like we've been celebrating that, but so I don't know. I'm just like I'm disgusted.
I think you're not alone there. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty, right? Is I think there's been a large movement of people that have been wanting Juneteenth to become a federal holiday for a long time. So you want to celebrate the work and the activism that went behind that, and also recognize that you would hope that such a commemoration would arise from a product of the nation actually shifting its kind of fundamental structure, right? Shift the systems, kind of like Jojo was saying, right? Shift the way we take care of people through housing, through health, uh, through rectifying historical injustice. And so far, it doesn't seem like any kind of advance has been made in that kind of conversation. Instead, it's been a number of, again, symbolic movements. While at the same time, even as we have these symbolic movements, right? What does it mean to have Juneteenth while at the same time local, state, right, federal people moving toward to strip the work and the literature and the scholarship that we have around understanding the history of racism in this country. So it feels shallow without the more deep shift.
Absolutely. I think it is shallow. Elder Linder.
It's ironic because you'd think that after all this time and after all this, sort of petitioning for recognition of Juneteenth, that we would be overjoyed that there's, it's finally being recognized. But now that it's happened, it's reminiscent of why we celebrate Juneteenth in the first place, and that is that the larger society is like 2 years behind the times. It's like this is something that should have happened I mean, if there's anything that this nation should be celebrating, it should, a native nation that supposedly celebrates freedom, it should be celebrating our ending slavery in this country. And so I don't know, it's sort of daunting that it's taken this long for our nation to come around and recognize, this momentous act of, being the end of slavery. So yeah, I think there are a lot of mixed feelings because most of us have been celebrating Juneteenth for decades, and
many decades. It's true. So it's unfortunate that we're still not getting the headway we need in terms of freedom, because that's what we're both supposed to be celebrating with Juneteenth, right?
I just hope it's not another instance of, the larger society feeling like, oh, now we've done what we need to do, so we're finished, because we're not finished. We're just beginning.
And as we look at lessons learned from the season of challenge, we have every reason to believe this is going to be just like that, which is, oh, okay, we had our first Black president. Racism's over.
Okay, we're done.
First celebration of the freedom of from chattel enslavement. But unfortunately, as we all recognize, there's been very little substantive change. And as a consequence, then we really do have to think about those lessons that have been brought forward that we can master so we can go on. So that's one reason we wanted to play Glory in the beginning. We don't know how, we don't know when all of this will come to fruition, but we do know that it will, based on the wisdom tradition of our African ancestors. So that we can be very proud of. And all those people who fought, I didn't know people were fighting for making Juneteenth a national holiday, because I grew up hearing about Juneteenth. Just close to the Colorado border and southwest Kansas, we're just above the Texas Panhandle. So people in Texas have been doing Juneteenth since 1865. It is interesting. What other lessons, though, do we want to talk about today that we have learned in this season of challenge? We've known this past year to be a real season of challenges.
I think we have some really good questions in the chat.
Oh, wonderful.
About the previous topic. And I was thinking that this is such a lesson in like just the struggle for Black liberation in general, because like a lot of our ancestors have said that they will try to placate us with, small progress and symbolic progress. And then we're not seeing certain things like we already discussed in the systemic changes. So it's like, how can you pass a federal holiday to be like Juneteenth, but you are blocking the teaching of critical race theory and the reason behind the holiday in the first place? But anyway, somebody in the chat said, does it affect the distribution of money, resources, instruments of violence, and access to democratic rights?
No. Unfortunately not. But I think, again, one lesson we surely have learned is we can see the difference between the forest and the trees. And this whole symbolic craziness that makes no substantive difference is just another signal, hopefully, for us who've been through this many, many times, to fight that much harder and to insist even more strongly. Well, you have acknowledged in a kind of backhanded way that our freedom didn't come not in 1776, but 1865, and therefore we are owed restoration. And so what's going to happen here that our culture, our lives, our economic endeavors that built this nation's wealth and the wealth of the captors, what's going to happen to restore our wealth and health?
I'm hoping that this season of challenge, as we refer to it, is the beginning of more people in the society beginning to wake up to the need for social justice and the need to attend to, ask themselves the question of what is wrong with this country? What is wrong? Why do we have the problems that we have? And not feel like, okay, those are problems from the past and now we're past those problems and let's just move on without really examining, the causation. Like, why have we done these things to ourselves?
Well, we kind of know why. At least I have a theory about why.
Well, some of us know why, but I think that there's a large segment of our society that has misconceptions about why all this stuff exists.
Yes, and as I was going to say, that's our purpose of creating Zola Monday, creating and enhancing our capacity to wield and demonstrate what Zola is, because at some level, racism, as we've discussed, is about greed and materialistic values that prioritize acquisition of object over humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been with us since the first big lie, which was this was the nation of freedom and justice for all. And that lie's foundational. So anything built on it has to eventually crumble.
Mm-hmm.
What will happen to make it crumble is our coming into awakening that this is indeed what's happening, and we can do something about it, if nothing more than taking our power back and beginning to define reality for ourselves, and quit giving in to the okey doke. Just
Mm-hmm.
stop.
You have a concept that you've put forward called belief systems analysis, and maybe you can talk more about that for our audience. But I think that one of the things that impedes our progress is that we have a lot of things that we believe in. We have a lot of things that we believe wholeheartedly, and that those beliefs are deeply embedded in our subconscious. And it's only in learning how to interrogate our own beliefs and values that we can begin to disconnect ourselves from the past and free ourselves to move forward into the future. Because those, a lot of the things that we believe as a culture and as a nature are things that get in the way of us being able to embrace the future and move forward.
Absolutely true. In fact, in terms of belief systems analysis, you just nailed the first step, which is critical self reflection and coming into some deeper understanding of our own belief system. And you're absolutely correct as well that most of the things that we've been taught to believe are true are absolutely false. And most of the things we've been taught to believe are false are absolutely true. So we're in a upside down situation, and it's very toxic and very challenging. We have so many people trapped conceptually and intellectually, and all of these things that we can break through, but it requires our doing exactly what we're doing, which is to try to bring increased knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Evan, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I think along that same vein, a lot of the theory around belief systems analysis, around optimal conceptual theory, I think is essential right now, because I think, to your point, right, when you have a foundation that's built on greed, that's built on individualism, that's built on, in a lot of ways, like nationalism, these are the things that kind of our whole world, like organize our whole world basically, and we're seeing very real in very real time watching it crumble. We're watching like health structures crumble. We're watching people die in mass because of our inability to understand ourselves as in connection and understand our destinies as intimately interwoven.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I hope this is one of those things where you talk about, right, the wisdom of our ancestors, the idea of what diaspora means, the idea of being able to take people from disparate, distinct experiences, but for them to understand themselves still as connected, as sharing family, as sharing history, as sharing a future. Like that can be like a guiding wisdom that serves to rethread how we understand ourselves as not just as like a community and society, but as a world.
Absolutely.
That's what I've been thinking on.
And the thing you mentioned, Evan, about we have this step forward, with the recognition of Juneteenth as a holiday, but then it's happening at the same time that people are talking about creating laws to prevent people from learning about their past. Yeah, it's like that's the kind of thing that we have to wrestle with. It's like
and that's the design, isn't it? It's not like that's new behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Divert, distract from the real issues, hopefully lay something out there that people will buy into, and they'll be so happy and involved in that they'll forget about what the real issues are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to happen. I hope people realize that's just not going to happen. Not in this day and age. And we can't allow it to happen. We have every reason to not only learn the lessons of our past, these season of challenges, but also master those lessons. And one lesson that has to be mastered is the lesson that helps us to see the society we're living in is built on a lie, and everything built upon it is going to eventually crumble if we wake up and take control, take our power back. I think that the reality of our thinking being scientific, with the pandemic, everybody's, well, follow the science, follow the science. And it would be so wonderful if they'd follow the science, because the science is, in the wisdom tradition, our answer. But we don't follow the science. Actually, to Evan's point, if we follow the science, we know not only are we interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent, there's no way to separate us. That nature, the physiology, the physics of it, the biology of it really prevents that. And so hopefully we will begin to follow the science, because we demand it be followed, not the fake science, because we all know about that. The fake science is a science that has us believing that affirmative action is going to benefit too many Black and brown people. No, affirmative action benefited who? Oh, white women more than anybody else. Or so we're caught up in a conundrum where people are telling us things that aren't true. They're telling us those things often enough that we begin to believe them. Masses begin to act as though they are true, and therefore the status quo is maintained.
I think that one of the lessons that we have learned, though, in this season of challenge with like COVID-19 is that, because people were forced to be in their houses, we did see like a larger racial awakening, and people starting to question things, and people started to say, like, that's not right. Though, like, Black people have been saying this for like thousands of years, hundreds of years. So I think that at least that, some of the people that were slower to understand some of the things that were happening because of racism are finally starting to question a little bit of it.
Absolutely true. And hopefully beginning to see we pay more for healthcare than any nation in the world, and our health is worse than the vast majority. What's up with that? Why are we paying more and getting worse healthcare? Let's figure that out. That would be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the Affordable Care Act is really the solution, but it's a start. I'm trying not to be Debbie Downer this so people leave us depressed, but it is so much we have to grapple with. And so maybe what we should do also is spend a little bit of time talking about glory and Black joy, because irrespective of all these challenges, all these lessons we're mastering, the truth is we've been through far worse than this and have come out and have got more.
And I think that people fear the change because they fear losing something. They feel like, making this kind of change is gonna equate to a net loss, when in reality, it has to equate to a net gain for all of us. Not just a net gain for Black people, but a net gain for all people. And I think that, that somehow we have to help people recognize that it's not a zero-sum game where, if one sector gains and another sector has to lose. I mean, I think about the getting a larger slice of the pie, and some people feeling like if we get a larger slice of the pie, then they have to get a smaller slice of the pie, when the reality is that if we all come together, we can just make more pie and everybody can have a larger slice of pie. I don't know if we lost Elder.
I think she maybe had to step. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I'm at my grandchildren's and they were watching television. You heard them watching television.
First
Well,
things
they would
first.
pick them up. But I see, Jojo, you said somebody had a question about CRT, and we definitely should address it because it's people are very confused.
Wait, Evan, did you have a comment? I saw your mic unmute.
Yeah, but I do think the question on critical race theory was important. The only thing I want to throw in very quickly is I heard Nana Linda saying she didn't want us to spend too much time being Debbie Downers. And I thought it was actually really interesting, which made me reflect again on like lessons learned is so we had the Student Circle Book Club. It's going to be a very brief tangent, Jojo. We had the Student Circle Book Club, and I see Jerome Lockhart is in here in the comments, so shout out. He's a part of our Student Circle Book Club. And we were reading Fanon, right? And one of the things that people will say about Fanon is, you know, some people interpret him to basically say that a lot of our psychological interventions aren't all that worthwhile unless we tackle the overarching structure, right? In that sense, like the specific psychological shifting that you can do in terms of worldviews and whatnot might not matter as much if the structures don't shift. And I think one of the things that I brought up in the book club, and I'm happy that, again, Nana Linda has been a big proponent of this, is I think one of the things with the interventions, one of the lessons that you can learn is maybe a more healthy mind is able to kind of grapple with the structures that need to shift while at the same time holding that level of balance, right? I thought that was interesting because even as we're having this conversation around the challenges and the hurdles that we still need to face, people are smiling, people are laughing, right? Because we're able to hold the both and hold like the positives, right? Hold that we are moving, hold that we're in community with people that understand the direction we need to push things in. And at the same time, still see the targets without growing too complacent. I think that's a key lesson, right? That complacency doesn't mean happiness, right? Forward momentum, understanding the situation as dynamic and needing of shifting. That's positive, and I think that can be healthy.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So we tackled then this notion of critical race theory, and it's very much related to what Evan was just talking about in terms of our capacity to grasp a consciousness that will lead us to freedom and to liberation. My beloved Derek Bell, who's considered the father of critical race theory, was someone who was very much committed to helping us tackle and grapple with the issue that race is seemingly intractable, not only on a social level, but also on a policy and legal level. And why people would not be comfortable with us grappling with that such a clear reality is very curious. I think what happens, as you may or may not know, the people who typically talk about critical race theory are law professors. That's what Derek Bell was, and that is who's kind of picked it up, and that's where you see it in the literature most often. Usually, at most universities, my guess is not many social scientists or people who are even studying history or race are talking about critical race theory per se. Um, and therefore, most people probably wouldn't necessarily know what the tenets are. The primary tenet is race is a serious problem and it's intractable. And now let's begin to look at what we can examine in terms of social policies and practices that make that so. So it's not surprising that people who don't necessarily know the literature would think critical race theory was a thing, that if we just got rid of that, we would have no more talk about racism or systemic racism or the systems of racism and dehumanization that have to be disrupted, because they do. But I think it's kind of got a little bit of cachet because it seems like something people could dump all critical thinking about race and racism into and ban it and therefore get rid of it. It's kind of a nonsensical idea because we can talk about racism, systemic racism all day and all night and never mention the terms CRT. um, And I'm sure that the legislators that are trying to prevent us from telling the true history are, again, simply trying to keep that lie, that foundation intact by thinking that if we can prevent people telling the true history and we continue our lie about the history, then we'll be all right. We won't. We won't be all right. And the good news is, if we understand at the root of racism are questions of moral values, ethical standards, spiritual acumen. Those are the questions from which racism emerges. And it's also those features that we must begin to embrace if we're going to solve racism, but not only racism, classism, sexism, ageism, weightism, you name it. And we've said, oh, you're not as good. So we have much to gain, many problems to be solved when we really come to grips with what's at the root of that mindset that would think it would be okay to enslave other human beings for centuries and force them as chattel to build your wealth. And then free them to do what with what? Well, we said 40 acres and a mule, but we were lying. We're actually going to give reparations to the slave owners, and the people who were enslaved get nothing to do nothing with. But despite that, look what we have done. Look what we have done as non-immigrant Africans in the Americas. Not only did we build this nation's wealth for the captors and the nation, but we have survived. Many of us have thrived. And now we need to make sure that those values, which are denied by virtue of the racist, sexist, classist mindset, are values that we just have to get rid of because they're non-sustainable. Humanity is non-sustainable as long as those are the premier values.
But it's not just an issue of getting rid of values that people hold dear. It's also a process of replacing those values with values that are more optimal, as you would say.
Yes, nature knows no void. So when you remove the old suboptimal values, we will begin to be infused with values that say, oh, all life is interdependent. Oh, I am one with that spirit, that infinite divine force. Oh, I am one with those who came before, those who come after, nature, my entire community. As we shift that consciousness, as you say, Elder Lindner, absolutely. It's kind of like the thing with the emotional emancipation circles, where we were initially talking about defying the lie, but defying the lie without embracing the truth is not going to get us very where. We have to defy the lie, but most importantly, we have to embrace the truth. And what is the truth we need to embrace? The truth we must begin to embrace is the truth about reality. It's essentially a spiritual phenomenon. It's about consciousness. All is mind. Tahuti was right. Thoth Hermes were right. But we don't know that because we're not taught that. Because if they teach us that, then we will have more power and won't be easily manipulated, led, or socially engineered.
And I'm happy you said that too, because that is going back a little bit. Those are the ideas that they're not attempting to grapple with. So the people that are trying to suppress conversation around critical race theory, trying to suppress conversation around authentic, true history that has kind of organized, unfortunately, the lived conditions of marginalized people, specifically in the U.S. They're not grappling with what you're talking about when you're talking about like our spirit reality, our shared reality, right? And there's no intention to, right? I believe you said there's it seems like there's this desire to take all critical thinking, lump it into like the umbrella term of critical race theory as they understand it. And that is, as a matter of fact, I want people to know like that is literally what's true. Like, in terms of like, the national conversation, it is very much explicitly a manufactured debate around the subject. You could go back, Christopher Rufo, who's one of the people who really like kind of sparked this recent, I think he's like the major influence who got Trump thinking about, oh, we should ban all these things. He tweeted specifically that if we can do this, if we could take all these ideas, take all the things that seem seem bizarre, all right, around leftist or progressive movements and lump them all under the brand of critical race theory, we could get this banned. He tweeted that,
Wow.
right? And so that was his explicit, purposeful mission. And if you watch them, right, specifically the national figures, right, debate these points, they're not grappling with the ideas, as you said, the actual thinkers. They're trying to shift it towards more European and American thinkers that they're more comfortable with, that they can more comfortably dismiss. As an example, Mark Lamont Hill has his whole show where he tries to have like honest conversations. He says honest conversations with people across the aisle on those issues, and you'll still have people. Like I think it was last week. It was a philosopher. I'm not sure. Maybe an economist. James Lindsay went on, tried to have an honest conversation. James Lindsay went back to his Twitter and said, "You see, they're all just Marx. It all goes back to Marx. Everything they're saying is just Marx, and Marxism is the worst." That's the level of engagement around the issue. So you might find somebody in your day-to-day life who just is genuinely ignorant of these issues, and maybe you could have that honest conversation with them. But we should be under no illusion. The national conversation, the national debate we're saying is a manufactured one explicitly to suppress this type of thought, erase the Black scholars who contributed to it, and lump it all underneath these white European American scholars that they think they can more easily erase from America's public square.
One thing that helps me to think about it is to make a separation between beliefs, values, principles, and paradigms. And I say that because, we base a lot of these things on, we argue about beliefs. We argue about what people believe, and we argue about what people value. And a lot of the fight is about replacing our values with your values. We believe things that we want to believe, and we forget that there are principles that transcend our beliefs and values. There are principles about how the universe operates that doesn't depend on people's beliefs and values. There are principles that operate in the universe that that go beyond what you believe and don't believe, and who believes this and who doesn't. And that's what I think our ancestors were trying to focus on. They're trying to discern what those principles were, and then fashion a society, fashion behaviors that were based on following those principles, as opposed to getting caught up in he believes this and she believes that. So I think that if we can learn how to do that, learn how to focus on the fact that there are principles that transcend our individual beliefs and values, and try to fashion our social behaviors to correspond to those principles, then I think that we're moving in the right direction.
I think the challenge there is it all comes down to beliefs on an individual basis. So we're talking about a conceptual system.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to inform my beliefs, my perceptions, my thoughts, my feelings, my behavior. But we're talking about a system, not a specific belief. So I think our ancestors were really good. Not only did they identify those principles, they built a cultural system around them, rooted in Ma'at, which is truth, justice, and righteousness, that existed for at least some 6,000 to 7,000 years. So we know, we have the historical record of that. How do we translate that in contemporary times when people have been so influenced by a Western worldview that says, A equals Z, and you can see A equals Z because I said so, and look, you can't get to Z, and it's all very convoluted and troubled. But I think if we can look at those principles, what are some of those principles you just referred to, Elder Linder? And we can see one of the primary principles is all is mind. All is mind. All is consciousness is probably the language we use today. As we've mentioned before, we come to this world with mind, with consciousness. We leave this world with mind, with consciousness. All is mind. And so in that context, the most direct um, avenue to conscious mind is thought, is beliefs. And so if we can begin to examine, because for me, it's not a, if our belief system is in concert with the heights of knowledge across cultural groups, then we will be fine. When our belief system is counter to the heights of knowledge across cultural groups, that's when we run into the problems that we've been facing for about the last, 2,000 years. So it's complicated, but yet it's not. It's really quite simple, because one of the things we knew, since all is mind is all is consciousness, what is it the scripture says? To think of a thing, that's the reality. As a man thinketh, so he is. So it's a very powerful tool that we have, this tool of being able to think and to feel and to intuit and to discern. And I've always been of the belief that because self-knowledge is the basis of all knowledge, if we just take the time to sit down and think critically, think deeply, we'll come to the right conclusion. If you just take the time to sit down and think critically and deeply, and until it begins to make sense. Again, we're in a social context where they try to get us to believe, oh, things aren't supposed to make sense. Well, maybe from your cultural frame that may be true, but for mine, it's all about knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And with all of thy getting, get understanding. So we have a rich heritage that has come before us that's left the roadmap. It's not like we don't know what to do. It's not like we don't even know how to do it. But what it is developing that inner connection to that divine infinite that will give you the courage and the security and sense of well-being that allows you to go against the grain. Because at this juncture, we're at the fork in the road. What is it Biden used to say? The soul of America is in the balance. Yeah, the soul of America is in the balance. And he was not wrong to use that term, because we as Black people in this country have always fought for the righteous soul of America and the liberation of America. And I'm getting off my soapbox now. You can just...
That Nana Linda, you triggered a thought in me on the topic of like lessons learned during seasons of challenges. I think a big lesson that I learned this year was that like we have to also rest in between these moments of us fighting, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And if I'm super exhausted, then how much, is the thing that I'm doing going to really help my community? So I just wanted to quickly put that out there.
Absolutely true. Be still and know. We have to get still. One of my favorite scriptures is call it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, the trying of your faith worketh patience. Let patience have her perfect work, leaving ye perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And that's what your thought triggered in me, Jojo. We have to be patient with ourselves, don't we? Because we're told, oh no, go, 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 do. And that's all well and good, but look where it's gotten humanity, on the brink of destruction. Let's just sit for a moment and breathe and be still and know.
And be silent.
Silent.
And the silence allows a space for the consciousness to come in. And, we miss that consciousness because we live in a society that's, that teaches us never to be silent, never to be at rest, never to let our minds be at rest, and never to let our minds be open to the consciousness that is there.
Yeah, technology doesn't help that, doesn't it? Because don't get on your phone or your iPad or whatever you're on. It's like a black hole, just suck you in and you can't get out.
Well, technology, like a lot of things now, is a mixed bag. It's like everything has pros and cons, and because of technology, we have the capacity to share thoughts, to share concepts across miles. I mean, you and I and JoJo are thousands, hundreds if not thousands of miles apart, and yet we can share consciousness. So technology allows us to do that, but because of the way it's farmed out to us, we are so busy, being bombarded with stuff that we don't have time to go into that consciousness and appreciate, the possibilities.
Which is true because our ancestors were able to do this without the technology. I could actually send you a thought thousands of miles away and you could pick it up. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Another conversation.
I was going to say really quickly, I actually do like that point a lot. Like we're talking about, right, the way that ancestral wisdom can still, guide us. I think I don't think it's a coincidence that in the last year I've seen a lot of people thinking about, especially on the continent of Africa, a lot of thinkers and philosophers thinking about how ideas are taken from animism practice in Africa, shamanism practice in Africa, can guide how we balance ourselves with technology, because it is a new force that is at this point almost like omnipresent in our lives. And I think a lot of the issues and problems that we're seeing that is linked to a lot of the issues that we've discussed in terms of rampant misinformation, the way that social media can really disrupt community, disrupt mental health, because people, as I think Dr. Linda was saying, kind of just allow it to infiltrate every aspect of their lives and then determine their behaviors, right? Because that's what a lot of these companies want to do. And so there's a brand of thinking, a new philosophy guided by this wisdom tradition that teaches us how do we be more in balance with this new force in the same way that people knew how to be in balance with the spirit and balance with the earth, right? And that's something that we can look at in contemporary America and see that balance with the earth, balance is not something that people regularly practice or spend time broadly spend time practicing, spend time thinking about. So I think this is another example of this wisdom tradition and how it can further balance us as we grapple with new challenges.
Absolutely true. Is there anything else in the chat, Jojo, that we need to attend to?
Yeah, there's a comment that I made when you said that our ancestors used to be able to transmit consciousness without the technology. And I said, that's the reason that we came on here today. But this thing has we're connected. But I don't see anything else except for what we were addressing before with critical race theory. I don't know if you see anything, Evan.
I see Jerome, shout out Jerome. He's telling us to rest. He's talking about the importance of rest, patience with self.
Stillness and silence, yes.
Silence. And that is essential, that is key. And I just want to throw that towards JoJo, because me and JoJo will be offline talking about the fact that we can't keep saying yes to stuff, can't keep doing more things. So I'm saying this to the Zola family. If you see JoJo doing anything extra, you can yell at her. I will be yelling at her on text, so make sure you yell at her because she's doing too much. We're all doing too much.
I used to run and commit. Well, I still overcommit. I still try to do too much. But then after I retired, one of the things I recognized is that, over the past 25 years, I had never really had time to stop and think. After I retired, I would get up in the morning and there's a lake that's about a half mile from my house. Actually, the lake is in the picture behind me here. I go down there and I walk around the lake. And as I'm walking, I'm thinking, and it's like a laboratory. It's like that's my consciousness laboratory. I used to, I used to put earphones on and play music, and after a while I decided not to do that. It's like, because it's in, it's in escaping from all that input, that you allow the input that, God put here for you to come back into your awareness. And that's something we have to learn how to do. We have to learn how to, like, be in the world, but not be bombarded by the world, and become conscious of our surroundings without being, absorbed into that surrounding. That way we can connect to the infinite. And that's how we, reacquire that connection to consciousness. Because the infinite is all around us all the time. We just have these filters that, keep us from connecting with it. And what, Jerome says about, being silent, being patient with the self, and settling into that stillness opens you up to infinite wisdom and consciousness.
Comforting to know we can never really be disconnected. So just as you're in your flurry and feel disconnected, just take a second and say, oh, wow, thank God.
Because you're always connected.
I am really right there, right on at one. At the moment I realize and focus my attention in that kind of way. So the creative life force is constructed things with infinite intelligence. And if we can get into that flow, it's certainly in our best interest. The flow, though, is gonna flow with the music, without the music, in nature, out of nature. There's nothing out there that really can separate us, and that's the good news.
We separate ourselves. And when we stop separating ourselves, we return to the connectedness.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The idea that we've been focusing on trying to create and wield Zola is a powerful idea, and we're so thankful that the Association of Black Psychology has supported our putting that out there, and we hope that it's been very helpful to people as we've really tried to grapple with some very serious issues and some very uncommon issues, from thinking about psychology as a cosmic phenomena to delving into the energy fields of melanin and epigenetics. So as we pursue, hear my grandson trying to pick up, as we pursue the knowledge, wisdom, understanding that's been left us by our ancestors, and that we're back here to recreate, to really uncover and unearth. We're just hopeful that you all have benefited, and also that you have felt that you could participate, because we haven't intended this to be just a conversation of whoever's on the panel, but rather really do anticipate and appreciate your comments or questions.
Somebody came crazy. They said, I want to address the elephant in this space. I want to know how long the hiatus will last. I have enjoyed these talks and want more. That's so funny.
Oh, thank you, because we didn't say, well, maybe we did or we didn't. So it's a month, just a month. The month of July, we will be on a hiatus, and we'll be back in August to celebrate our anniversary. So thank you for that. We appreciate you. You'll be missed as well.
But even while we're on hiatus, you can still be thinking about the things that we've talked about, because this is the start of a conversation, and it's the start of a shared thought process that will continue. Will continue after the hiatus, but it has to continue in you, in each one of you. It's not just a space for you to come and be a passive participant and listen to us talk. Uh, we're trying to begin a conversation that includes you, and that you should be thinking with us about where this is going, where this leads. And you should be thinking about how it evokes you to rethink how you've been thinking in the past, because that's what it's about. It's about delving into our subconscious to make what's unconscious conscious, so that we can then process it and then embed new things into our subconscious, because it's those subconscious beliefs and values that drive our behaviors and lead us to do what we do, and that's what we want to learn how to change.
Jojo, we will, and Evan, you probably know this as well. They'll still be able to listen to the old sessions on, what is it, YouTube?
Facebook Live. So this very same platform, Evan will be going back and looking at all the old episodes and posting them everywhere so that we can continue the conversation. So we encourage y'all to please stay alert to what we're doing and join us in the conversation, because we do want to know, like, what should we address in the next year of creating Zola Mondays, and who should we invite to the table? Like, we're really curious.
And challenge us on what we've said, you know.
Oh yeah. Also, I would be remiss not to. President Ethiopia would get on me if I didn't mention that conversations like this will be happening next month as well. While we are on hiatus, we will be involved in different capacities, like the Association of Black Psychologists 52nd Annual Convention, which is a virtual interactive experience this year. If you are curious or interested in registering, I will be putting the link in the chat on Facebook.
And I see that there's a boot camp coming up that the association is organizing for people who want to begin to, grapple with the ideas of, African-centered thought.
Yeah, actually, that's from Erica McGinnis in London, who's organized that, and she's pulled in almost everybody from ABPsi presenters. But it should be very interesting. And I know it's wonderful when people are seeking knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. It's there's nothing better, in my opinion. So we so appreciate your seeking that knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And one of the things we do know, if you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will be open. So appreciative of that endeavor. And as we think about taking our brief hiatus, there's just going to be a lot of things going on, not the least of which will be the ABPsi convention that's virtual coming up that JoJo mentioned. Evan, will the Soul Bonus Circles still be continuing?
Yeah, so we actually just had one recently for on Juneteenth, and we'll be having a number dates to be decided. We'll definitely should be sharing the dates and the registrations on the Facebook page, on our Instagram accounts. It should be on the national website as well. So as those come out, you'll be the first to know if you're checking in on our social media.
That's good to know, because for people like me who are not as adept at social media, who need a bit of a guidance, we'll at least know that it's out there. Someone can help us get hooked in. Mm-hmm. If we can just think in terms of all the lessons that we have learned collectively, as well as personally. And one of the things that's true, at least based on the theory of optimal psychology, is that the reason negativity is allowed in human experience, given the divine creator's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, is for the opportunity for us to grow, to develop, and to come back clearer, stronger, more capable of going forward. So when you think about all your lessons, think about them as opportunities. And then think about those opportunities as your step ladder to the next level. Because in the wisdom tradition of African deep thought, it's really about achieving those higher stages of human development, which we don't, even Western psychologists say, we're at level 1 or 2. And there are many more. And guess who they identify, or at least, what was his name? Kohlberg had said, Oh, Martin Luther King is really an exemplar of the higher stages of human development. So we as Black people have a lot to be proud of. We as people of color have a lot to be proud of. We as people doing good, feeling good, thinking good, because we know what's so important isn't so much how we appear, but what's in our hearts, what's in our minds, and what we do. So we're encouraging people to continue to stay the course, can continue to be hungry for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and take a stand. Stand up for what's just and what's true and what's righteous. Because if you take a stand, there will be throngs of spirit friends standing with you, protecting you and guiding you. And so I know while particularly me have been introducing this other way of thinking that may sound a bit crazy at times, the reality is there is another way of being in the world that is much more healthy and much more in line with a reality beyond our limited capacity to know as people conceptually incarcerated in the mainstream cultural worldview. So stay strong, stay clear, breathe, get some exercise, get some fresh air and sunshine, eat some good food, not because of how it tastes, darn, but because it makes you stronger and healthier. And get good sleep, good rest, and most of all, stay in connection with your loved ones. Talk to some friends and some not friends.